Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome Governor Murphy. If I remember correctly, it's the first time at PAFI that we have the honor to host US State Governor. So welcome to PAFI. Look forward to hearing from you. New Jersey is an important state for India. It is home to what I just learned, the second largest Indian community in the United States after California. It is also the state that has attracted the maximum of Indian investments from an industry point of view. It's a state with which a lot of people in this room might have deep connections. I know some. They have families living there. And so it's important to have a conversation with New Jersey and to hear the governor's views on what really happens in terms of relations between a state and a nation. States are important. States are important in India. States are important in the United States. And state-to-state relationship, therefore, are important too. We had a visit by another US state governor last week, governor from Iowa, and at USIBC we were hosting them. And it will be a pleasure to host you again this afternoon, Governor. So I'll now hand it over to Sukumar to take the proceedings forward. Thank you.
Governor Murphy, welcome to India, and thank you for speaking to us. I'd like you to start off with your opening remarks so that we can set the context, and then we can jump into some questions.
So I am very happy to be here at the Public Affairs Forum of India, leading a very sizable delegation, many of whom are with us, led by the First Lady of the great state of New Jersey, Tammy Murphy. You may want to stand up and take a bow. I also want to give a shout out to Sam Joshi, who should stand up and take a bow, the mayor of Edison, New Jersey. Edison is the fastest growing Indian community outside of India in the world, and it's in New Jersey. Thrilled to be here. This is, I'm coming up on 8 years as governor. India is the only country to which we have made a second economic mission. And in fact, in addition to that, our lieutenant governor was here on an economic mission in December. We established last year the New Jersey India Commission. Some states, I think, probably come to India and introduce themselves. That's not the case with Jersey and India. We go back deep, deep ties, culturally, economically, societally, religion. I just attended the BAPS temple a couple of weeks ago, which is the largest of its kind in the world, in Robbinsville, New Jersey. If you walk down Oak Tree Road in Edison, you would think you were in Delhi. As was mentioned, we have the second largest Indian population of any American state, but far and away the largest per capita state. And it's not just a history of our state in India, but it's the opportunity that is before us. Potential for more job creation, more investment. We have a number of universities with us represented at the highest levels, university-to-university memoranda of understanding where we think there's enormous opportunities for 1 + 1 = 3 outcomes. We have government-to-government meetings at very highest levels. I'll be honored to sit with the Chief Minister of Telangana right after this discussion, by example. Some cultural engagements. We're incredibly enthusiastic. Now, I acknowledge my last observation. We all acknowledge that there's been some turbulence of late. And by the way, I'm an optimist. I think that turbulence finds its way to I can't speak for the Trump administration or certainly for the Modi administration, but I'm an optimist that this gets to a more settled place sooner than later. But we felt strongly that of all, it's easy to show up in a place when things are rosy, when you're rolling downhill with the wind at your back. It's much more of a statement to come when things are a little choppy. And we want to remind folks that subnational relations, in particular between New Jersey and India, are as important, or I would argue, more important than ever before. And it's one thing to say that, it's another thing to show up as we have done. We'll be in Delhi, Mumbai, Kerala, and Bangalore this trip. We've done other parts of India in the past. I've been coming to India since 1997. Tammy since 1989. So not only is it a place we know well as a professional matter, but as a personal matter, this is a place where we feel at home. Thank you.
Thank you. You spoke about turbulence, so I'd like to start from there because I think for most people in this room, it's probably the most important question at this point in time. And there are multiple dimensions to it. How do you see a resolution happening? I mean, because we're now at a stage where the trade ties are, I wouldn't say they've broken, but they're in a situation that puts several Indian companies at a significant disadvantage.
Yep.
And you spoke about subnational partnerships. So I'm not going to ask you to dwell on the problem because we all know what the problem is. But is there any way in which a subnational partnership can lessen some of this turbulence? Is there a possible solution?
Let me say two things. I do want to address the turbulence just for a brief moment. I'm an optimist. I feel like the signs, the phone calls, the social posts, the fact that the Deputy Trade Minister apparently was in Delhi earlier this week, the fact that you've got a new ambassador from the United States coming here soon who has a very close relationship with the President. There's too much at stake in the broader relationship as a geopolitical matter. I believe this gets sorted out. My guess is and again, I'm not at the table. I'm a former U.S. ambassador, in my case to the Federal Republic of Germany, so I've got some sense of what those rooms look like. But my sense is it's a grand bargain that encompasses interests on both sides. By the way, the Biden administration was adamant about purchases and exposure to Russian fuel. The Trump administration is adamant. They're expressing that adamance in a different way. But again, I believe, without being in the room, I think all the evidence suggests there's too much at stake to not get this sorted at some level sooner than later. That would, I hope, also apply to visas. We had a discussion earlier this morning about student visas, where New Jersey relies enormously on Indian students, particularly in graduate programs, to get access to our universities, many of which are represented at the highest levels. That also needs to get sorted out in a way that balances obvious national security on the one hand, but the openness that the United States is known for and has always been known for. So what can we do at the subnational level? I'll give you a specific example. If you assume you're in a new, regardless of where the grand bargain may settle, if we can assume that we're in a higher tariff world, one, I think, obvious notion that we are out here promoting aggressively is for Indian companies to consider manufacturing in New Jersey. Not just because we're nice people, but a couple of months ago, I signed the largest manufacturing incentive bill of any American state right now. And where we've already seen evidence, if you match up that incentive with where we think there's opportunity, I would single out in particular bio, life sciences, pharmaceutical, biologics, advanced manufacturing. We've already seen we cut the ribbon on Enzene, an Indian pharmaceutical company making manufacturing in New Jersey recently. Biocon, we just cut a ribbon on. We just visited not in pharmaceuticals, but HCL Technologies with their new headquarters in East Brunswick. There's a fair amount of evidence. So again, I'm more of the carrot versus the stick. Let's put something out there that's really attractive for a company to say, wait a minute, particularly if we're in a higher tariff trade environment for some time, that may be quite interesting to actually take advantage of that incentive and manufacture stuff in New Jersey. We are the ultimate innovation economy, and bio, pharma, life sciences are right at the top. So that's one area where a subnational, in this case New Jersey, could take an environment, whether we agree with the environment or not. I'm not a big tariff guy in terms of our allies. I understand the objective that the president has, and I agree with it, but I just think it's inflationary. It's not something that I'm a fan of. But if that's the environment we're in, let's think of creative, compelling ways to make New Jersey even more attractive.
Tell us a little bit about this economic mission that you've brought here. You said this is the second economic mission from New Jersey that you've led here. What kind of companies are you speaking to? What are your broader objectives? Typically, when Indian states lead similar missions overseas, they all come back and they like to give out these numbers as headlines, right? I mean,
so do we.
$7 billion of investment promised,
yeah,
and will create 70,000 extra jobs and so on. So could you tell us a little bit of what the first mission achieved and what you're hoping to achieve with this mission?
Yeah, so since we've been in office, Wes Matthews, I think 3,000 jobs have been created by Indian companies in New Jersey. I can't promise, or more than that, I can't promise you that some of them wouldn't have happened had we not taken these economic missions, but I guarantee you most of them wouldn't have happened. And that's putting aside dollar investments, et cetera. So this mission looks a lot like our typical ones, including our last one, which was in 2019. So huge jobs and investment objective. I can't give you an exact number yet because we're still, most of the meetings haven't happened yet. But it will be significant, and it will be overwhelmingly in the innovation economy. So it'll be biopharma, life sciences, as I mentioned, technology, telecommunications, software in particular, advanced manufacturing, especially in food and beverage, generative artificial intelligence. New Jersey's becoming sort of the East Coast California for generative AI. Film and television, we're becoming a global player in film and television. Bollywood is a big attraction for us to make things in New Jersey. So jobs and investment overwhelmingly in the innovation economy. Government to government meetings. I mentioned the Chief Minister of Telangana, who I will meet with shortly. We do a lot of sister state agreements, exchange programs, best practices. Those have been very productive for us around the world, but certainly in India. I mentioned higher education. We'll sign probably 10 or 12 memoranda of understanding. And we're not into signing it just because it's a nice signing ceremony. We do these because they have real teeth. Typically exchanges, research collaborations, again, looking for 1 + 1 = 3 results. And then lastly, we'll have cultural, religious exchanges. I've got a meeting with a very senior religious leader tomorrow morning, by example. So we want to encompass the whole sort of experience of the relationship between New Jersey and India. We've got a dynamite schedule. We're packed. We are wall to wall to wall right now, and very excited to be back.
One of the main concerns that people in India have, leave aside tariffs, because tariffs is another issue, is the fact that it's just become tougher even for legal migrants
For leaders.
For legal migrants, people who are there legally, migrants who are there legally, even for them it's become far more difficult to get things done. Students, for instance, if you look at this academic session, I think the number of students going to the United States has dropped sharply as far as India is concerned, and the reasons for that are obvious. I think the visa regime has just gotten that much more tighter.
Yep.
And there is this sense of uncertainty about making a life, making a career, growing a business in the US.
Yep.
What would you say to people to reassure them on these areas?
Yeah, I mean, first I would now acknowledge that the anxiety is real. You can't argue with the numbers. We have, Wes, over 2,000 students awaiting visas to study, most of them in graduate schools at our universities. Stevens Institute of Technology is not here, but I think 60-something% of their graduate students are Indian. So we've got to sort that out. That is a real concern. We had a constructive meeting with our mission, US mission, this morning. I think their sense is that this has to migrate from a 3-month summer window where they used to process 120,000 visas around the country here to more of a year-round process, which I understand. That, however, has to realistically fit with the admissions processes at the universities, and that's still a work in progress. And then there's this whole question of surveying folks, social media, et cetera. So I think that ultimately gets, let me put it this way. I think that if I had to guess, this is pure guessing, the tariff situation inside of a grand bargain gets to a better place pretty soon. I think the visa challenges get to a better place, but not as soon. I think it's going to take some time to. The broader question you raise is a very fair one right now. There's anxiety, not just among the Indian community, but among immigrant communities more broadly, who are in the United States or in New Jersey absolutely legally, that they have passports, that they're on valid green cards, that they've got valid visas. And I hope that, I don't think that's necessary. And I think, again, this gets back to agreement on principles that we should have secure borders. We should have an enlightened 21st century visa regime. Criminals should not be hanging around our country regardless of what their status is. New Jersey, by the way, I'm proud to say, is the safest state in America. Objectively, based on the data, New Jersey is the safest state in the United States of America. And I'm proud of that. We're proud of that. But there's no need to spread that anxiety. It's one thing if you're a criminal and you've got anxiety, you should have anxiety because we're coming after you. If you're in our state legally and you're doing everything right, there's no reason whatsoever you should have anxiety, and yet these policies have led exactly to that. I would say to folks, I think all things pass. I believe, again, I'm an optimist by nature. I think with time, we get to a better, more stable, less anxious place, but I can't deny the facts at the moment.
Well, in some ways, what's happening with migrants, legal migrants, is just a subset of what's happening in larger society, right? I just think the US, over the last 8 months especially, we've seen a change in its approach to many things. One is, of course, trade, because the approach, it's turned mercantilist, right? I mean, it's the kind of thing that we thought went out with the Dutch and the English East India Company, and you know, you suddenly have a return to those days.
Apparently, it didn't go out.
Yes, and you've now reached a situation where one of the things that the Republicans, for instance, prided themselves on was on keeping government separate from business, and you have a situation where the government is now taking stakes in businesses. You have a situation where companies are sort of buying charters, right? I mean, paying the government to do business in other countries. So the rules are changing. And simultaneously, I think society is changing. Right? I remember many years ago, and this was much more in the Indian context, I think it was almost a decade ago, and we were speaking about the freedom of press, which is one of these very, very sensitive issues, as sensitive here as it is sensitive in the US. And we were speaking about the liberals and the right wing, and the argument that we heard back then was that if the right wing were to come to power, they would ensure that there was complete freedom of expression, because over the last 20 years, they've seen themselves be cancelled and they've seen themselves be censored, and they do not want a similar situation. But now, if you're looking at what's happening in the US, I think you are seeing a very, very different kind of playbook. So how do you make sense of it all?
That's a big question. And I'll give you a couple of thoughts. One is, I think, and we've seen this in other moments in our history, I'm sure in India's history and elsewhere, that when certain regimes come to power, they, in the early days, overcorrect. They go in the direction that they have said they'd go in, but they go very aggressively and very far. And I admit to you, we may be in a period like that as we speak. I also would suggest that history would show that ultimately settles into a, not always for sure, but ultimately it settles into a more balanced reality. Among other reasons, elections happen. So there's a governor's election in New Jersey this year. There's a governor's election in Virginia. They will be signals toward congressional elections and more governor's elections next year. Elections have consequences, and that's typically why history will say that things moderate. And I certainly, on the one hand, will not deny that this has been very aggressive and very hard and very far, even relative to expectations. But I would also argue that more often than not that gets balanced in some fashion. And secondly, and finally, we're here on the heels of a very traumatic couple of weeks in America with a political assassination. And all of the fallout from that is still unfolding. So it's not just what we've seen in the past 8 months and how that might fit into a historical context, but you've now got a very specific tragedy and a couple of weeks of fallout on all sides of the political spectrum that's still playing out. Some of it's very troubling, some of it's expected. God rest this guy's soul. He's a young guy with a wife and kids. That's not who we are. India's had political assassinations. The United States have had them. There should be no place for that. No matter whether you agree or disagree or how angry you might or might not be, that can never happen. And God willing, there's a lesson from this that we remember, and in fact, it doesn't continue to happen. But we need to get through this period. And I hope and pray that we have leadership that allows us to do that in a balanced way and sooner rather than later.
Okay. This will probably be the only political question I ask, but also because you spoke about the elections. Your party, the Democrats, they seem lost. I mean, at least from the outside, right? And
do you mean me personally, or is it?
No, not you.
Just want to make sure.
But they just seem lost, and I'm saying this as an outsider.
Yep.
And what is the plan? How does the party reinvent itself?
Yeah.
What is the road ahead?
So that's the big question in America right now, certainly the big political question. And I'm putting aside a tragic assassination and other specific factors as a more general matter. Again, history suggests that when you get beaten, particularly for the presidency, there is a period, whether we like it or not, where we're trying to find our way. So this is still less than a year. I'm not shocked that we haven't found our way. And again, history would suggest that that's what happened when Reagan beat Carter. It's what happened when Reagan then beat Mondale. It happened when Nixon beat Humphrey. I mean, and it's a couple of years where folks, who's going to be the next standard bearer? How hard are we going to fight? What are we going to stand for? So I'm neither happy with where we are as a party, but I'm also not surprised where we are. The antidote is a very famous American sports team owner once said, just win, baby. We have to start winning elections. And that has to start this fall in New Jersey and in Virginia. Now, as I sit here, in both states, the Democratic candidate is up in the polls meaningfully. And I'm not shocked by that. It's a lot of the stuff, we've talked about trade, tariffs, visas, but this so-called big, beautiful bill is hugely hurtful to millions of Americans. And Americans, like Indians, are smarter than sometimes we, in the political class, take them for. People get this, and they're not happy. So job number one is to win. And I think you win by capturing that anger and anxiety you spoke about earlier and saying, you know what, we're going to be the guys that look out for you. We're going to have your back. We're going to stand for the issues at the kitchen table that matter, affordability, access to health care, jobs, that we're that party. And I think that's who we are, first of all, naturally. We are the party of the middle class and working families, and kind of for all the wrong reasons, meaning all these awful bills and whatnot have handed a political, they may be bad for America, but as a Democratic Party matter, this is an opportunity, and we'd better damn well take advantage of it, again, beginning by winning in New Jersey and Virginia in November.
Who are the Democratic leaders we should be looking at?
A whole lot of them, and that may be part of the challenge, that it may be the flip side of, hey, how come you guys don't have your act together? Part of that might be that we have a very deep bench with a lot of folks with big aspirations. I'm biased toward governors because I am one. I've chaired the Democratic Governors Association on 2 occasions, and that's very partisan and political. I've chaired the National Governors Association, which is nonpartisan. And by the way, a very well-functioning nonpartisan organization, of which there aren't many left in America. The NGA, as it's referred to, gets a lot done. But I just look at the bench, and it is very, very deep. And I'm biased toward governors, and we've got some great governors. Governors, I think, are particularly well equipped because the job is essentially a mini version of what you're required to do as president. You're the chief executive of your state. You have to balance a budget. You're not in committees. You're not in a body of 100 or several hundred. You've got the ball, whether you like it or not. I personally like that. I like that responsibility. So I don't know that there's one name, but there's a very deep bench. Beyond governors, in fairness, but I think the bench among governors in particular is really impressive and deep.
There is a theory that that a lot of the churn that we've seen, not just in the United States, but around the world politically, has been caused by the fact that existing models do not work, that the existing global order is changing, that rules that were once considered sacrosanct are no longer things that can't be broken, right? I mean, you look at it geopolitically, you look at it economically, and even in the US, right? I mean, this whole feeling that there is a minority 1% that is benefited at the cost of the 99%. Do you think, as your party reinvents itself, there is need to come up with a new approach, a new strategy?
I'm probably not in that camp, but I am in the camp that, you know, we campaigned in New Jersey basically on 2 or 3 words: stronger, fairer, you could trust us again. And we've achieved a lot in almost 8 years in those directions. Stronger is more jobs and better standard of living. Fairer is shrinking inequities. And trust us means we're stable. You can rely on us. I think within those realms, we can always be better, both as a nation and in the global order, particularly in the second one, the fairness piece. And I think my party is probably rightfully accused of poo-pooing any combination of rural voters, voters who don't agree with us, voters who are going to be, you know, in a particular trade as opposed to in a so-called white-collar job. So I accept that we need to look in the mirror and be better at that. But as a broader matter, the Federal Reserve in America has worked. NATO has worked. The European Union has worked. The relationship between India and the United States has worked. I'm of the opinion that these institutions, these norms, they may all need to be tweaked, and I accept that. In fact, I'm sure they all do. But whether it's a bilateral relationship, a norm, an institution, a multilateral relationship, these have worked brilliantly particularly since the late 1940s. I'm not in the camp that they need a wholesale renovation or elimination. I'm firmly in the camp that these have largely worked really well.
I'm going to throw it open to the audience. Do we have time for audience questions? We have 5 minutes? Okay, we can take 2 questions. Please identify yourself. Lady in the second row.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Pratyaksha. Good morning. I'm Pratyaksha from Indian School of Public Policy. I have a question. The tariff rates America has proposed is a negative side effect for India. So wouldn't it hamper the economic relation between India and America? And as India is a sovereign country, and no third party can dictate what India can do. So what's your stance on it?
So I think I heard you, but what's my stance on the tariff question? Yeah, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm an optimist. First of all, I'm not a tariff guy. So I think it ultimately leads to inflation. I am a tariff guy if a country deserves to be punished. And there are examples out there without mentioning names, but not against your allies, on the one hand. On the other hand, Russia invaded Ukraine for no cause. They're the aggressor. They need to be squeezed. Period. I'm an optimist that you can square those 2 statements, that you can find a common ground that serves in a more global sense those interests, that you have a reasonable resolution on the trade front in the context of what is a very real geopolitical concern. And I'm, as I say, I'm not in the room, and I'm certainly not speaking for either the Trump or Modi administrations, but the vibrations that I'm getting, and I think we're getting, is that notwithstanding this air pocket or this bump in the road, we'll get back and we'll get to a reasonable conclusion. If for no other reason, there's too much at stake. There's too much at stake in the India-US relationship. And in the meantime, just to reiterate, New Jersey is going to play inside of whatever the broader context is. We're going to find a way to continue to be existentially important to India and vice versa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more question. Gentleman there, that's the last question that we'll be taking.
Hi, Governor. So I am Nimish Mukherjee, a scholar at Indian School of Public Policy. So my question is quite similar to my colleague. So Fareed Zakaria is on record saying that the damage is done. India will no longer trust America. And so do you resonate with that statement? And what impact will it have on New Jersey?
Yeah, I'll take the latter part first. I'm not in Delhi or in India this week by accident. We're here in particular in a moment of turbulence to say that we care deeply and that we are stable and that we are here for our counterparts while these broader issues get resolved. So we're unequivocally open for business. And in particular, I reiterate this massive incentive package we have. If indeed we're in a tariff world, we think we've got a very good tool for Indian companies, particularly in the innovation economy, to onshore manufacturing in New Jersey. So the trust question, I think, is a big one. And being a very amateur student of the relationship, you had a lot of really good years sort of from the Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy administration years in building trust. You then had a period which was more challenging, I think of Nixon in particular in 1971, when there was a period of time when you had the hyphen, as they call it, in the India-Pakistan relationship, which was less constructive as it relates to trust between India and America. And then I think you saw, particularly from the late Clinton years through several administrations on both sides, including, by the way, the Trump administration, first time through, but George W. Bush, Barack Obama as well, where there was several decades of deepening of that trust. This is clearly an air pocket, clearly a bump in the road. And I think the question before us is, to use the vernacular, can we get the toothpaste back into the tube after these however many months? Color me perhaps a realist, but I'm a glass half full guy. I'm an optimist. I believe we can. But we have to work at it. You can't just take this for granted. Particularly if you're coming out of an air pocket, you probably have to work twice as hard, and I'm sure the United States is committed to that. As I mentioned, a new ambassador who's very close to the president. The spirit lately in terms of social media, phone calls, trade meetings would suggest there's a real energy on both sides to get this back into a good place, and God willing, it will sooner than later.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, it's my distinct privilege to propose a vote of thanks at the close of this inspiring session. Sir, Governor Murphy, we really thank you for your time and your insights. So you mentioned you're an amateur student of the relationship. I don't think you are, and I'm sure the crowd agrees with you, agrees with me on this. Sir, your remarks and your advocacy for the relationship, especially in this time of geopolitical turbulence, is an example, is a very powerful example to both sides of the equation. Sir, please allow me to present this small token of our gratitude.
guys also do bar mitzvahs. To hire someone. Great. That's really special. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Please allow me to also acknowledge the thoughtful moderation by Sukumar Ranganathan, under whose stewardship we had a very insightful discussion. Also want to thank very quickly the organizers, the leaders of the Public Affairs Forum of India, and last but not the least, thank you so much for your meaningful engagement for this session. It is a collective exercise. Thank you so much.